Day 679 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 361,000 military personnel losses, which represents an additional 680 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 7 APVs, 15 artillery, and not a single tank today. But one must wonder, is that because the armed forces of Ukraine all of a sudden became incapable of sending cheap $400 drones to destroy Russian tanks? Or is it possible that the $2.5 million a piece Russian tanks don't grow on trees? You decide. Then we'll head back across to the map once again today, as again there was air defenses active in the Belgorod region of Russia. And it was even noted that parts of a Russian Pantsir air defense system, missiles, found their way somehow into someone's bedroom and on the streets, which is clearly the booster of the Pantsir missile. You'll notice the geometry pattern on these pieces, but even so, that might not stop internal Russian news from calling it an American HIMARS or a Czech Republic rocket. Then we'll head back into the Ukrainian map today, looking at the Sinkivka direction in the north, as the AFU has regained some area north of Sinkivka as per latest reports, and it's a location that has been the theatre for Russian mechanized attacks for months now. But Sinkivka is not even worthy of the title of town or small city, and the nearest town or city to this area to make for a political win for Russia would instead be Kupiansk, which, by the way, they would need to recapture. That's what the green on the map indicates, that they've lost that territory before. But hey, even Kupiansk is miles and miles away from this more or less stalemated north. Then to the next AFU frontier, perhaps, Kodymka, where geolocated footage showed Russian forces in control of the area east of the railway tracks, just north of the settlement. And do remember, Kodymka is not to be confused with Klishchivka to the north, which again, Ukraine liberated a few months ago, whereas Kodymka was taken by Russian forces around the time of the Battle of Bakhmut, as they call it. And it is tricky operationally, though, for either side to hold forward positions, either side of the canal located there. Hence a demarcation point or line of sorts there. Then moving just a little bit down to Avdiivka today. So starting off, I'll mention no map changes here, but the Ukrainian General Staff did advise that the AFU did improve their tactical positions just southeast of Novobakhmutivka, which would certainly be designed to impede Russia's northwestern movements from just beyond. And for the Ukrainian forces to entrench in their positions here would mean that they seek to expand or widen their Avdiivka perimeter in the name of making it an expanded attritional meat grinder of sorts. Because that's certainly what the Ukrainian defenders do best, as far as Avdiivka is concerned. Then, somewhere in the southeast, I believe this one was in Kherson in fact, but within 24 hours of Russia deploying its most modern anti-artillery system, aka an artillery reconnaissance platform, it just so happened that a HIMARS strike came to town, wiping out this counter-fire radar system that is estimated to cost around $250 million US. And previous to this, Russia had a bunch of, you may remember, the Zupark 1 platforms to assist in performing these types of counter-battery operations, but those ones got mostly, if not all, wiped out a long time ago now. I haven't seen those in quite some time. And those ones were quite expensive too, but price tags aside, Platforms like these might be good in theory for Russia, but Russian forces always seem to lack the communication networks to relay information back to their artillerists, which is probably more truth than fiction when you consider that Russian military doctrine hasn't changed that much since World War II. And their go-to method of artillery to inaccurately perform this blanket fire across a sector has remarkably remained unchanged with their ground army. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Then, also somewhere in the southeast, a Russian 2S4 Tulip was detected by the Ukrainian Shadow Unit and subsequently destroyed. And these platforms are an interesting old 240mm mortar Soviet piece to come out of the woodworks due to their ability to deliver powerful shells to destroy immobile fortified strongpoints, a role typically performed by airstrikes in the Russian military. Then moving across briefly to the area of Verbova in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, as Ukrainian troops have reportedly advanced, forcing Russian units to abandon some positions, but we do wait for a map update on that news. Then headed across to some news for today. So following the events of Russia's recent missile campaigns to inundate Ukrainian air defenses this winter, I should make a brief shout out about Ukraine downing a record number of Russia's highly vaunted KH-47M2 hypersonic Kinzhal missiles, with 10 out of 10 shot down just yesterday. In fact, UK intel from just 2 weeks ago stated that Russia's undefeatable Kinzhal missiles just don't live up to the hype. But in terms of some more Russian hardware news, what might be even more fascinating is how Russia's current missile of choice, the KH-101, which has had the debris extensively examined now, shows a production date of Q4 2023. And indeed, Russia went to great lengths to obfuscate or remove the serial numbers as much as they could, but this is actually impossible given all of the external third-party country components that go into these missiles. So why would a country firing missile salvos want to do something like this and scratch off the serial numbers? Well, it's to stop tracing the origins and production timeline of the missile wreckage, as these types of details can be used to figure out which international supplier provided Russia the parts, which ultimately come from the Western market. And so identifying this type of information can go a long way to clamp down and sanction up on certain companies or countries to slow down Russia's warmonger machine and its missile production factories. Oh, and not to mention, it's a great idea to scratch off your serial numbers, especially when you're firing missiles from the fourth quarter of last year, which even looks worse when you had a whole 12 months to build up a new stockpile. But perhaps the bigger issue for Russia is that they're not getting a lot of bang for their buck, with the December 29th attacks costing an estimated $1.27 billion and the January 2nd attack costing an estimated $620 million. And so for an annual military budget of about $60 billion for Russia, those two waves combined over a period of, say, 1 or 2 hours collectively, amounted to about 3 to 4% of their entire annual defense budget. So like I say, not a lot of bang for their buck realistically, and it helps to make a lot of sense as to why Russia doesn't pay a great many of their soldiers, as they've been complaining about their lack of pay for the longest time now. Then in a somewhat related news piece to that, and a really quick Russian military mobilization blunder segment, as there was a recent Czech media news piece on how 11 men were drafted to the army right after obtaining Russian citizenship. And it comes not long after Russia relaxed its rules for gaining Russian citizenship, but it's actually more of a case of the Russian military relaxing its rules for entry into their army. It has nothing to do with citizenship. Because you can forget any semblance of a professional Russian army at this point. as they're largely playing it by the numbers now instead. Once again, World War II style. Then moving across to a quick funny to round it all off today, guys. So, in one of Putin's latest propaganda pieces, as he appeals to his only major base, the babushkas, he's pulled out this fine weapon once again, with these babushkas being filmed making a wish for the new year, which is, let Putin win the elections. Now, Putin winning the upcoming Russian presidential elections in March is a foregone conclusion. And so apart from this being an extremely cringeworthy puff piece for Putin, the only question remains is that just how many sacks of potatoes did each babushka receive when being used for this staged video of support? And one thing's for sure, they were definitely not getting paid in eggs. So thanks again for watching, guys. Bit of a short video again today. Please like and comment. I always do appreciate that. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.